Hello gamers, this is a little announcement to say that I'll be guesting at 2 cons in the next 2 weeks. The first is AmiCon in Dublin on the weekend of the 15th, and the second is Anime North in Toronto on the weekend of the 22nd. I'll be there for all days of both cons, and at Dublin I'll be holding a special Eyepatch Wolves booth where I'll be selling this exclusive t-shirt. If you're a real fan, you'll be at both conventions. See you then. Good God Almighty, Malcolm in the Middle has returned. Why is that such a big deal? Well, because Malcolm in the Middle might be the most late 90s show of all time. I think just as a pure element, if you boiled the late 90s down into a single thing, you would either get like an ECW hardcore match, a Destiny's Child song, or an episode of Malcolm in the Middle. Chemically, the 90s is so infused in Malcolm in the Middle that it's kind of staggering to imagine it in any other era. Yet here it is, it's zombified corpse lurching into the year 2026. And is that a good thing or a bad thing? Well, let's break it down. Malcolm in the Middle is a show I have a special soft spot for. It's one of those shows that, like, when it came out, I was the age of the main characters, and so it was really, really easy to relate to, like, their struggles. It also had one of the sickest television openings of all time. Fox, play as much of that opening as you can without getting us copyright struck. I really love the bit where Bret Hart is in the intro for like a second, and I also really love the bit where like the anime dude kind of smiles at you. I always felt like that bit felt like really hopeful. It felt like a big brother, of which I do not have any big brothers. It felt like a big brother staring down at you and being like, everything's gonna be okay, kid. I would later in life learn that that's not at all what was happening when that anime dude smiles. Here's the full clip. The show Malcolm in the Middle was also just fucking great. Unlike a lot of the sitcoms at the time, it was focusing on like a lower income family, and it really committed to that. Like, there was a grit to Malcolm in the Middle, from like the kind of missized clothes that the boys would wear, to how like messy their household was, to like everything about it. It felt like life growing up in lower class 90s suburbia in a way that felt like very genuinely real and authentic. They weren't hiring like traditionally super like beautiful or attractive actors. Everyone just kind of looked like a normal person, and it felt kind of real. And then like a huge part of that is you have one of the all-time casts in any sitcom ever. You have Frankie Muniz, who is a very talented actor who also starred in the early 2000s hit movie Stay Alive, which I bring up for no other reason than I wanted to talk about the haunted video game movie. And also, I mean, look at how sick this poster is! You also have Jane I'm sorry, one moment. Kaczmarek. You also have Jane Kaczmarek, who's just this unrestrained force of paternal rage and defense. She was brilliant. I used to have such a crush on her when I was little, and after seeing the new Malcolm in the Middle, I would say the flame still burns. And of course, Bryan Cranston. This was his pre-Breaking Bad role. I cannot tell you how strange the first episodes of Breaking Bad felt, because I was so used to seeing him as Hal from Malcolm in the Middle. Just this absolutely lovable but deeply maniacal and unhinged human, and he is so much of this series, but the truth is they all are. Justin Berfield, Christopher Masterson, Craig Lamar, all the stars are just made that show. And I just think frequently, like, the stories in Malcolm in the Middle were so simple and yet so, like, effective. Like, it wouldn't be anything of consequence, you know. It's like the family would go bowling. There's actually an all-timer of a joke in that episode where Malcolm can't hit a single pin, and then he fucking... Look, I'll just show it.
You want a strike? I'll give you a strike! Here's your damn strike!
Another of my favorite episodes is when Lois just gets so angry and furious with the family that she just leaves and goes to the batting cages. And her family, you know, Malcolm, Reese, Dewey, Hal, they all like show up there to try and be like, no, we love you, please come back and help us live our lives. And then they end up getting in a fight with like a bunch of clowns, and it's so stupid and sweet because they're doing that for Lois, and there was so much to love about Malcolm in the Middle. Now, did Malcolm in the Middle eventually run its course? Yeah, it did. As with a lot of child actors, they have an annoying tendency of getting older, and then you have to start changing your show around them, with characters like Dewey eventually kind of having to become something else. And I would say there was just kind of a process of Flanderization with a lot of the cast, where the joke nearly started being about the jokes about the cast, as opposed to letting the comedy kind of flow organically from the characters themselves. I don't think it ever reached like Zombie Simpsons levels of bad, but if you stuck around for those first 3 seasons, there was like a magic to it. And I think what made it so good is there was such like distinct relationships between all the characters. There was like different dynamics between everyone, and even like some of the supporting characters. Craig, the guy who worked in the store, who was like hopelessly in love with Lois, or Commandant Spangler, who ran the military school that Francis was in. There's one episode where Francis and Commandant Spangler have this big heart-to-heart, and that is one of my favorite episodes, just because it is funny, but it's also kind of touching. And I guess that's what I'd say about Malcolm in the Middle. It was always kind of touching, and even like the very last episode, it ended with this big kind of thing where Malcolm's talking about how much pressure he was placed under, and what that is doing to him, because he is like this genius. And Lois says, I put you under pressure because I need you to become the president of America. Her thing is like, you come from like what this is. You understand what a struggle life is for ordinary people. And I need you to take that knowledge and bring it to the highest levels of government. And it was like an unhinged ending, but it kind of worked, you know? But yeah, that episode aired in 2006, and then 2 decades went by without a peep from Malcolm in the Middle, which brings us to this year, when 4 episodes were released. And I really did not know what to expect from these. And I'm watching it, and I'm watching the first episode, and I'm immediately feeling like, okay, this is very clearly later season Malcolm in the Middle quality. It's not like as sharp as those early seasons, and I'm kind of disappointed in that I feel like there's a kind of polish to this show now that was never there before, and I don't mean that in a good way. I mentioned earlier about how Malcolm in the Middle always felt gritty. You know, you had like kind of handheld cameras. You had some really like inventive and weird camera work that like felt awkward but was great. I always remember this one bit where Malcolm is asking Hal to teach him to skate, and they do this huge dolly zoom, and all the lights in the kitchen go out, and it's just like, wow, so much effort went into that one shot. Someone should really do like a good like retrospective on Malcolm in the Middle. Maybe there's one out there, but I mean, I've certainly never seen it. I'm just trying to think of anyone who's done a video like that. No, I got nothing. Oh, no, sorry. No, I got nothing. Anyway, and with the new season, I feel like a lot of that production, it feels so much more polished. And I think the weakest aspect of this adaptation is that old Malcolm in the Middle, the soundtrack sounded like it was bashed out on like grungy punk guitars. There was like really just phenomenal little like kind of guitar riffs and drums and everything that really kind of sank into that like real 90s style. And the new Malcolm in the Middle has what I can only describe as kind of like sitcom clown music. And I really do dislike this kind of music in sitcoms, because I feel like a joke will happen and then the soundtrack will go and it's like, it's not a laugh track, but it's nearly a fucking laugh track. And so that aspect of it I did find disappointing, and that's probably my biggest problem with the new series. But the silver lining there is that is my biggest problem with the new series. So this is 4 episodes, and from what I can tell is that this was intended to be some kind of movie or something like that ended up getting cut off, because all the episodes have like these weird hard stops. They don't really conclude any storylines, and there's a continuous narrative running through the 4 episodes. Like the 4 episodes take place over the same I think it's 24 hours. It might be a little longer than that. It does feel odd. But I think where the show started to win me over is that, it's 20 years later, and now Malcolm has his own daughter. She is like him. She is kind of gifted and awkward and all that kind of stuff. And it's like, okay, yeah, this is all about what I expected. But then you get to the end of the first episode, and Malcolm's family, and by the way, we never actually learned the second name of the Malcolms. Unless we did in a super late episode, I'm not remembering it. Man, if only someone who knew a lot about Malcolm in the Middle was editing this video. I think it's just Fox Kid though. And so the family come to visit Malcolm, and they see his daughter, and they're immediately like, "You have a daughter?" Because he never told his family that they have a daughter. He never told Lois and Hal that they have a grandchild. And that was such a fucking crazy, weird twist, but it kind of speaks to some of the kind of trauma and issues between the family, and it was so funny and ridiculous but kind of real, and it sort of brought me back in. I was like, okay, what are we doing here? What's going on? Okay, I'm ready for this. And over the following couple of episodes, I would say the new Malcolm in the Middle raised itself from later season Malcolm in the Middle to more kind of mid-season, things are still good, but maybe not as good as they were Malcolm in the Middle. And I was really impressed about that, It's kind of shocking how many of the characters come back. Even right up until the last episode, I was still getting no way, this fucking dude. And then you get just an all-timer of a performance from Bryan Cranston. There's a bit where Hal does some I think he microdoses some mushrooms or something like that. That entire sequence is as joyful as you hope it will be. Just one of the all-time best Malcolm in the Middle bits ever, and I'm so delighted that that's the case. Perfect Hal is my favorite new character. Oh my god, I'm not going to spoil it. It gets so weird and so dark, and it's just phenomenal. There's also a new addition to the family in Kelly, who is the non-binary sibling of the Malcolm in the Middle household. And, when you have a dynamic as tight as that family, bringing in a new member is always a risk. And a part of it is just that Dewey doesn't feature very prominently now, because the original actor, he was kind of just you know what? I'm off here living my academic life. I don't really want to be doing, TV anymore. And so they introduced this new sibling. I actually thought that they were great. I thought the actor that played them was brilliant, and I thought that they fit in really, really well in terms of it's this new rival character for Reese, and is a little sharper than him and a little better able to kind of create the kind of back and forth storylines that Malcolm and Reese used to have. But Malcolm is a grown adult now, so you can't really do that anymore. And look, I don't have to even look it up to know that this is the kind of thing that some people are going to get annoyed about, a non-binary character and a thing like this. But number one, if you dislike non-binary characters and things, I got some bad news for you, buddy. But two, unfortunately, Malcolm in the Middle has always been kind of woke. There's a very famous episode where I believe a babysitter or friend of Malcolm in the Middle, I can't remember which it was, tricks Malcolm into thinking Reese is gay and tricks Reese into thinking Malcolm is gay. And for a late 90s, early 2000s show, the level of restraint and respect the writing pays this scenario is kind of fucking incredible, because Malcolm and Reese, they're not grossed out by each other. They don't get weird about it. They get super supportive of each other. It's the only time in the whole show that they're basically if this is okay with you, I just want you to know that I support you. And it's genuinely this profoundly moving moment. I think there's another moment later on where a girl that sneaks home with Reese from the military is gay for Lois, and Lois, obviously it's kid, but she's cool about it. She's okay, I understand what's happening here. Let me talk to you, sweetie. So Malcolm in the Middle has never been afraid to address issues like that, and I thought the way they did it here was great, and I thought Kelly's moment in the last episode was genuinely really, really sweet. So I came out of this series really feeling man, I could go for some more of this. And I think that's the last thing I expected to happen when I put this on. I really didn't think Malcolm in the Middle could exist in a modern era. I would love if they went back to the old soundtrack, and I know the counter argument there is, well, it's not the 90s anymore, old timer. And look, I know it's not. I just think that soundtrack was such an iconic part of the show, and I think it would be really cool to have it back. But yeah, I would happily watch some more of this. yeah, it's 2026, Scrubs is back, and it's not bad, and Malcolm in the Middle is back, and it's pretty good. And you know, considering how much of a nightmare the rest of reality is right now, I'll take it. Okay, till next time.